Hello and welcome. And hello to our virtual audience. My name is Lainey Rose. I am the events manager here. Thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you to our virtual audience for being here. We always have something on our calendar here. We've got 14 different book clubs. I'm just going to talk directly to you. It's more awkward if I don't. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are thrilled to be celebrating National Poetry Month here with this wonderful event with these wonderful authors that we are very excited about. Um, Written with tremendous urgency and ferocious candor, the prose poems of Book of Potions captures a woman caught in the middle of life, no longer young, not yet old, trapped between generations, locked in stereotyped roles and stultifying social norms, confined by other people's expectations and their projections of what a woman should be. And when we first heard about this book, our owner was immediately like, we have to host this event. We are very excited to be hosting Lauren K Watel tonight. She is our author of the evening. This is her debut book, a collection of prose poetry entitled Book of Potions. Potion equals book. Potion equals poem plus fiction. It was awarded the Catherine A. Morton Prize in Poetry, selected by Ilya Kaminsky, and came out in February from Sandabad Books. Her poetry, fiction, and essays and translations have appeared widely. Joining her in conversation is E. Hughes and E. Ethelbert Miller. E. Hughes is the author of Ankle Deep in Pacific Water. They received their MFA in Poetry and MA in English Literature from the Litau's Creative Writing Program at Northwestern University. And Eugene Ethelbert Miller is an African-American poet, teacher, and literary activist based in Washington, D.C. He's the author of several collections of poetry and 2 memoirs, the editor of Poet Lower magazine, and the host of the weekly WPFW morning radio show On the Margin. And now, please welcome our authors. Here we go! Yay!
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being online. We appreciate you. You're family now. Thank you, East City Bookshop, Lainey Rose, for setting this up. Thank you to E. Hughes and Ethelbert Miller for coming out, reading with me and chatting with me. Very grateful. I am going to be, for my first 2 pieces that I'm going to read from my very first book, I'm going to pair them with pieces I have very much enjoyed in Ethelbert's book, The Little Book of E. So first we will hear number 74. So loud the silence, in the morning birds whisper, open the window. I awoke on the edge. I awoke on the edge of a field, a snow-covered meadow plated with sunlight, and the sky was bright white and unnatural, and the silence was white too, a ravenous silence, and the birds had all gone away, and the squirrels were burrowed in the deep, and behind me the trees creaked in their bones, and the snow clung to their limbs down to the needles. The snow was layers thick and smooth, flawless across its surface, like something spread by a machine. And sunlight skimmed over the snow as if it were an impenetrable metal. And I stepped onto the field, holding my breath, because I didn't know how firm the snow was, or how deep. But it wasn't the snow that gave with my every step, it was the silence. how I sank into it up to my knees, the silence crackling around my feet, pulling me down with a sharp gravity. And I slogged through the silence, my breath shrouding my face, and the silence sliced through my lips, through my throat and into my lungs. The silence swallowed up my chest, and how close it seemed, the other side. So I kept going, kept stepping across the snow-covered meadow, across the sunlight, across the glittering silence, which lit me up, me, who'd always bristled in silence, darkly. This is 25. We have become fog, so senseless is everything. We walk into walls. In 77, the trees are falling. The sand is disappearing. There is nothing left. What's happening? What's happening to the tea and the sugar? They're vanishing. The cups are vanishing, vanishing the saucers and the table and chairs into the invisible, the overlight wideness. Where will we sit when the chairs are gone? And where will we eat when the table is gone? Vanishing the parking lots and the cars with their rusted underbellies, vanishing the yellow lines and the road signs. Where will we go and how will we steer when the cars are gone? The trains abandoned along the track like empty skins. How now the moon, plucked from the sky like a plum, and how now the stars, fallen to earth like so much glitter, the stars quilting the meadows like a frost, the stars with their lights gone out. How now the sun, as big as the sky itself and a fiery white, and the stars are as ash, and night is as ash, vanishing, and the day so white and broad, pouring into every crevice and corner, vanishing the secrets and the hiding places, vanishing all the ever unknowns. The shadows are vanishing, the day saturating the earth, the wide white day, the sun a burning tyranny. The night, all the darknesses, the secrets and the hiding places, these will be memories, and even they will burn, turn pale and thin, fade into the sky, into the light and the bottomless sun. And here we go. We are diving into the white, the wide windowless white. And it doesn't matter if our eyes are open or shut. Everything looks the same. And it doesn't matter if we're naked or clothed, because we can't see ourselves. Vanishing we are, ash we are, as we swim through the white, vanishing our hair and our nails, vanishing our vision, all our senses, vanishing into the overlight wideness, the wet like white, the vanishing, the very vanishing. Since I'm in Washington, I will read a couple of pieces that I wrote in the heightened anxiety of the current administration's first go round. Enjoy the mayhem. Enjoy the mayhem. Mayhem like you've never seen. Chaos in the streets, alarms howling, fights and fires breaking out in flash after glorious flash, the neighborhoods emptying out, the bars full of revelers, car windows smashed, the parks reeking of piss, the schools pocked with bullet holes. Enjoy the mayhem. Enjoy it while it lasts, because the boss is in town, waiting on the hilltop. And thank heaven he's selling all the good old values, pride in the homeland, loyalty and fealty, flags and pinstripes, family first, bloodthirst. The boss and the men behind him. Luckily, they're restoring law and order, and soon after the dust settles. More police, more riot gear, more lawyers, more prisons, more judges, more arrests. They'll export the criminals, all the bad guys and their bad deeds, the dark-skinned riffraff, the hook-nosed riffraff, return to sender post haste. The men will climb into their uniforms, the army men, the businessmen, the churchmen, their uniforms marching them in file up the avenues, and the ladies will giggle and swoon, and the gentlemen will bow with a creaking sound, and the rich will retrieve their riches from their safes. Before every game, the boss will sing our anthem, hand on his heart to cover up his bald spot. Everyone will cheer. We'll be safe at last from the riffraff and the mayhem and the past, safe even from the future. And our children will thank us for never having to grow up. The jails. The jails, they're full of prisoners. Why are they full of prisoners? Because everyone's doing drugs or selling them. Why is everyone doing drugs or selling them? Because they're bored and desperate. Why are they bored and desperate? Because they have no work. Why don't they have work? Because the jobs went away. Why did the jobs go away? Because the bosses put in robots. Why did the bosses put in robots? Because robots don't ask questions. Why don't robots ask questions? Because they don't have minds. Why don't they have minds? Because the scientists haven't gotten that far. Why haven't the scientists gotten that far? Because the government won't fund them. Why won't the government fund them? Because they're funding the army. Why are they funding the army? So we can fight. Why should we fight? Because we have enemies. Why do we have enemies? Because we're always interfering. Why are we interfering? Because we're better than they are. Why are we better than they are? Because we're free. Why are we free? Because we waged a war to worship our own gods. Why do we wage a war? To worship our own gods? Because we felt oppressed. Why do we feel oppressed? Because they put us in the jails. I'm a great admirer of the poetry of E. Hughes. I would highly recommend their book. It's quite wonderful. It captures the complicated relationship between love and violence and destruction and healing beautifully. Those tensions that sit together. And so this is in honor of your excellence. On the brink of this, on the brink of this silvering place, you sit and stare at the ground losing shape at your feet. The mountains loom behind you, like ancestors glaring down from the past at the messes you've made. The night, though not yet permanent, threatens to last past all reason. Not the darkness, but the restless emptiness, the quiet, the all but aloneness. As you sit and stare, you sink into it, the immensity that rises with the moon, the feeling that the world is uncaring, unseeing, that the world wants to keep you in the cheap seats with a warm beer and a cold hot dog, that all you have going for you is a beating heart and two shaky legs to take you nowhere, or at least to the brink of nowhere, where you'll sit and stare, still clutching that beer, and watch night take the field. Not the darkness, but the sense that creatures are coming out, creatures that emerge only in shadow. They creep among the weeds, they creep tentacled and groping, uncaring, unseeing, and make for all your open parts, your moist parts, the softest swaths of skin, the veins, the bruises, and they bite before you know they're there. They bite you and vanish like all the petty cruelties heaped upon you by those who love you best. Time for one more? Okay, last one. Thank you for greatly magnifying our audience. I have a special feeling for the kind people who will come to a bookstore reading of a lady who's just published her first book at age nearly 58 and is not at all known. So just thank you so much. And thank you so much to the bookstore that will host such a person, and we need you. We need bookstores like the City Bookshop uh, more than ever right now. So, nightfall. When I look up at the mountains, where the fog is gathered like a wedding veil, and the sky has settled close. When I gaze across the flowering meadow, where the fireflies flit from stalk to stalk. When I close my eyes and open them again, the evening waiting just off stage, the knees beneath me trembling, the silence majestic and stark. When the mountains fade behind the fog, like a passion grown stale, and the clouds gather like guests at the sacrament, and the sun behind the horizon, a priest waiting to perform the rite. When the last daybird sings and the last squirrel ascends the last branch. When the cars plow through the darkness and rumble over the bridge. When the river hardens into the stone of darkness and nightbirds peep out of the shadows. When the biting flies dart from leg to leg and the biting spiders creep out of the cracks. When the corners lose their angles and the marshes glow like tar. When I gather up my limbs, hanging from their sockets like flags without a wind. When I fold them with the tenderness of a penitent. When I put them in the cupboard and close the cupboard door, only then does the fog clear, as if the rings have been exchanged, the vows spoken, the priest declaring the couple joined in holy union, and the groom lifts the veil to kiss the bride. Only there is no bride, just the sky's face, her eyes clouded over. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Uh, it is very good to be here with you all and with these lovely poets. I think this is the third time Lori and I have read together, and I will read with her anytime, literally anytime. And Ethelbert has been my mentor for what, 10 years now. So it's an honor. Um, and an honor to be here with you guys. Sort of refreshing to be in a small crowd. So I'm going to read some poems I don't often read, and then I'll read from a new collection. Our past bowed like the branches of a madrone tree. I have taken with me what is left, your pajama pants, Pawpaw's green flannel robe, the worn leather belts creased by your hands. I have scavenged the photo albums, filed the pictures in this archive. Let them dry like Nakuda roses between pages, wanting them to leave me with stains of magenta, imperfectly kept, pressed between my longing. There is no name for our grief, just its music, the way its melody leaves the mouth, demanding the body buckle. In the late summer, I sat sweating in your living room, flipped through photos of us, counted our dead, our past selves bound within the confines of light, marked and shuddered against time, trying to find ourselves within the promise of future. In the west, the sun lifts herself over the Sierra Nevada and closes on the ocean, shutting us in at the end of her book. A bandit of light. A halo shone around the wound, the source of so much fluorescent pain. What else should we call this song of memory? The history of ourselves fettered in some secret, uninhabitable place. I'm originally from California, and a lot of this book is about um, the migration to from the South to the Bay Area. And it also looks at the life of the abolitionist Mary Ellen Pleasant. But at the core of this book is the question, even though it doesn't show up anywhere in the collection, is how do we unmake ourselves of violence? I ran until I could no longer catch wafts of ocean salt or hot tar in the air, crossing over miles of rural terrain until there was no evidence of home, just the backbone of the Sierras and everything I have failed to put to language. I have avoided the details of terror, the cockroaches crawling up my leg while I slept at a friend's house, how they laid eggs in the walls, my third grade teacher who called the cops on me as I sat in a field crying about a bully, the floors I slept on, the empty refrigerators, how ringworm grew mauve on my cousin's right thigh, the boy who begged me to show him my undeveloped chi-chis and took Polaroid pictures of them that developed too quickly in summer light, the way my mother beat me for it. In the present, no one believes me when I say we rarely saw the ocean, or it's the children who are the silent casualties of unprotection, or even now, the memories siphon through me instead of blood. I called home in January, Siskiyou County, 2011. When I answered, when she answered, I managed, Mom. Noticed the way alpine trees stood like hair on the white peaks of Mount Shasta, and a single mockingbird calling instinctively from a tree into green silence. I called into my own tender darkness, holding my mother's breath to my ear. Memories spun like a gyre in my stomach. She told me once I was her heaviest child at 8 pounds, the weight that positioned itself posterior and collapsed her pelvic bone. She watched me splatter myself from her insides and into existence in a ceiling mirror. What a horrific sight it all must have been, tolerating some gray growth violence, then its expectation to be loved. I rummaged for light, leafing its way through thick forest, and I fought an urge to jump from the nearest cliff, asking God if He had looked into the mirror as she gave me life, if He had tolerated the same reflection she had, my swollen face, my half unborn body twisting out between her thighs. I think one of the major, I'm going to try to talk and flip, so forgive me if this book is right in my face. One of the major themes or ideas I was just sort of leafing through in the book is this notion of place and land having memory, because this confluence between memory and history are so profound to me. The land having memory, our memories being shaped by the land, our history being shaped by land, especially when you think about the history of African Americans in this country and how, you know, I live in Atlanta now, so I really do think about how far the North is from Georgia, which is very far versus like from DC. Um, and then I also think about California. There were slaves brought to California to work in mines, which a lot of people don't know. But California has one of the biggest uh, mountain passes in the country, in the world, in the Sierra Nevadas. And people walked over that. I mean, it's granite at the top and it's freezing. And people used to walk over that mountain to get to California to settle it. Um, and often they would bring slaves and they would work in the mine and then they would send them back south. So imagine having to walk there and back. It's a far trek, even if you try to drive now. But I'm going to read one last from this collection, and this is from the middle section, from the perspective of Mary Ellen Pleasant. This is called "Failure is a Journey Home." It's number 11 in the sequence. And Mary Ellen Pleasant supposedly gave John Brown $30,000 to raid Harper's Ferry. I imagined my name Winnetka, beautiful land, a word I had learned during my travels. It was a small relief to choose my own name, signed my initials WEP instead of MEP, so no one would suspect my connection to John. On the train back north to New York, the leaves were beginning to turn yellow. The birds in an arrow knew to fly somewhere warmer, somewhere less harsh. For the first time in my life, I was unable to speak, caught in a negotiation with disappointment and grief, too tired to make meaning of our rebellion's failure. For the first time in a long time, I thought of the plantation in Georgia, thought of the first time I bled on cotton, how after so long the callus made it seem like the blood in me dried up. I thought of exhaustion. Lord, there is nothing more profound than being tired. Near the border, I found shelter with a group of abolitionists who too were trying to rework the past, to make loss something more than sense. By December, they hung John, made him an argument against war, against freedom. Yet what is he to me but the example of the collapse of love? The dark chasm between the Negro and the white, perhaps too long and painful to overcome. During those nights in hiding, I thought by candlelight of my mother who died long before I could buy her to freedom, which some days I feel is its own myth. Love is complicated. Many shout these words at the pain of living. But being a Negro woman with love is a slow death. The small part of you, the secret parts that are yours and yours alone until they aren't, expires with every loss. No amount of tears will reverse this. So many thousands gone. Isn't that how the song goes? The blood on the cotton is the only record. I'm going to read two more. And this is, to go on that theme of love, is a collection of love poems, which is very surprising for me to write. But in great fashion, the book is also titled Another Way to Say Dying. So um, uh, I'm going to read this one that is titled I Know Love by the Morning. My mother in a robe already has the cordless pressed to her ear. We've never said good morning, only insisted light be let in through the dusty blinds. She fixes the silk scarf wrapped around her head. The edges of her graying hair behave like children refusing sleep. My mother has this old habit of ignoring me, though she wouldn't call it that. She would say, "You are my child who always lands on her feet. You don't need or want for anything." The first time I held a woman, I thought I would die from its fullness. The ache of hunger so mundane to me, her body became an unappreciated miracle. I have made a habit of loving women for something other than what they are, burdening their flesh with the wholeness of my need. I need a way out of this regret. I need a way out of this child's desire for her mother. My mother now has hung up the phone. At the stove, she fries bacon, stirs a small pot of grits. Before she adds the cheese, she puts a bit in her mouth. She has prepared a meal enough for herself. I know love by this direction. You must make your own. One of my friends told me she loved this poem. And I was very surprised by this pick, so I'm going to read it. Um, Bull daggers between starshine and clay. And if you also didn't realize, it's a very gay love, book collection of love poems. Bull daggers between starshine and clay. I want to fashion my black mouth to speak this journey of our bodies into utterance. What does one call this road between us? Once a man called this road love. Today I call this path a sequence of music, the burgeoning of speech, the poem we leave in a puddle at the center of our bed, the place where we touch each other until all we are is sound and heat. This must be why God called the moment of separation the beginning, the pain of being torn into something new. You rip me where it's funny and it hurts the most. Somewhere between my legs is the most shameful part of my memory, the black portal of my need. My God, who is this sweet child you have summoned for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Is that right? Thank you, Erica, for those poems. Always good to hear them again. Lauren, thank you for sharing my own work with yours work. That was a surprise. So thank you for that. Um, I'm going to read two poems from We Eclipse into the Other Side. They are Tunis poems. It's poems that I wrote by my friend, my best friend, Mihail Kanas, who I think is online joining us. So everybody's not here in this room. They're out there somewhere. She's in Hilton Head. She's a Japanese poet and translator. Definitely my best friend. We correspond constantly. We've written this book, which came out in 2003. So far, we've written over 500 poems together. So this is called The Bath. I placed my book by the tub, hoping the pages will not reach for the soap. It is a soap trying to steal a metaphor. A washcloth is not something to workshop with if you want to be a writer. The bath is the best place to start a book club. We learn everything at a public bathhouse. The collection of lives, the anthology of bodies of all ages and sizes, bobbing, soaping, and splashing. It's sad to see the pandemic leaving a lonely ring around the tub. All the public baths closed like a mystery novel. Popularity has been in decline like the classics. People in too much of a hurry to bathe or read. And this second one is entitled Paris. And at that time, Miho was visiting Paris. So that's why I am in Paris is the first line of this poem. I'm in Paris. The French Revolution is sitting in a nearby cafe. The fish are out of school and swimming without their backpacks. A Berber cabbie sighs at ponytails and hijabs on scooters. Does anyone remember Albert Camus? My bilingual copy of L'Estrange remains half undeciphered. We forgot the war in Algeria until Frantz Fanon rings the doorbell. Every time we open the curtain, someone is being stalked. History needs a lover, not a bodyguard. And so those are two poems. We Eclipse into the Other Side. If I look at the 500 poems we wrote, everybody appears. Duke Ellington appears, Picasso appears, Errol Dorfman appears. Everybody appears in these poems. And one of the things I like about being an artist, and especially now at this point in my life, is collaboration. You know, working with other artists, especially artists that are sometimes visual artists. So you're stepping outside of the page. Sometimes, for example, when I started writing, the people who wanted to collaborate was musicians. So you'd be in the middle of you're in a reading and somebody decides they want to play bongos behind your work. No rehearsal. Somebody just decided, well, Ethelbert, you're reading with some rhythm. I'm following you, right? Like that. But what I do like is the collaboration and the learning. And sometimes what happens is the research. I think when I look at the 500 poems I've written with Miho, I go back, I've learned more about Japanese culture. She's learned more about African American culture. And so in that sense, as artists, we're building these bridges and ties that are, shall we say, enriching our lives, the quality of our lives, and improving our art. And so the collaboration is key. And I think occurs at different points in your life. This collaboration when you're early in your career, middle, and then later on in your life, I think is really, really important. And this is where hopefully every one of us here is on some type of journey. And that journey is one in which our work is our gift to you. And sometime you woke up and you're like saying, well, I don't like where Lauren's going. Well, you just need to pack or wear something different to get where you're going, because it is a journey, and a good artist will test you and pull you along on that journey. And sometimes what happens, it helps you grow spiritually too. So I just want to say that. Now, people know me for baseball. I'm the baseball guy. And I've written over 150 poems about baseball. But I use baseball as a metaphor for our life. So if you look at the titles of this baseball trilogy, it's If God Invented Baseball, When Your Wife Has Tommy John Surgery, and Other Baseball Stories. And the third one, How I Found Love Behind the Catcher's Mask. I'm going to read two poems from this. This is a 9-part baseball poem, like 9 innings. Death of a ball player in 9 innings. It has an epigraph, a yogiism. Always go to other people's funerals. Otherwise, they won't come to yours. I love that line. If you have nothing to do, just Google Yogi Berra and all the sayings. And, they're so funny. And, you keep going, waiting for another one. One, it's the game that gives your life meaning. 2, parents are shortstops and second basemen. We confuse them with pitchers and catchers. 3, to run around the bases is to chase oneself. Most people play tag with their dreams. Memory is just a ball in the air. 4, the scoreboard is nothing but an obituary. By the time you reach 50, it's over. The blues is a rain delay. A broken guitar won't play in a dugout. 5, marriage is an official game. Too many feel cheated when it ends. Lies are nothing but confessions. A curveball is a woman's best friend. The fastball refuses to walk down the aisle. 6, a woman might turn her back to a man on second. Too many stolen hearts never reach third or home. If you find yourself in the outfield, don't turn around. There's always a fence in a relationship. Running into a wall is something else. Outside church, every single woman needs a fan. 7, keep your business in the ballpark when you stand. Gossip always has a high batting average. The bullpen is not a bar. When you hear your wife whispering, check the number of outs. Love never lasts in the late innings unless you're lucky. Use the right bat if you can't find the right glove. A foul ball is nothing but desire getting in the way. 8, sex is often a hitting streak coming to an end. Never mistake a lover for a rally. Love your cap, but don't lose your pants. If you have to steal signs, you'll never fall in love. Divorce never makes it into the last inning. If you're on first, ask your therapist how you got there. If you're on second, don't look over your shoulder. If you need a third beer, you may never get to third. 9, death is a poor leadoff hitter. Too many strike out before the funeral. Amazing Grace is better than the national anthem. Learn to smile during the eulogy. Be sure they get your stats right. Remember, there are no more home games. The devil is a closer. Jesus prayed for extra innings when he was on the cross. There's only ascension after baseball. And I'll read another one of these baseball poems. And what I tried to do, I'll give you some. When I started out writing the first baseball book, they were poems based on childhood, childhood memory. Then I got into the technique of the games. People say, well, how can you write 150 poems about baseball? Give me a baseball term, I'll write the poem. Okay. But then as I got to the third book, I decided I really wanted to maybe use these poems to document baseball history, events. And so I'll read you this one. This is called Emmett Ashford, who's just as important as, say, Jackie Robinson. He was the first African-American umpire from 1914. He died in 1980. This is Emmett Ashford, who's really, really colorful. I like using that word. A black person call another person colorful. I like that. Oh, you're colorful. Emmett Ashford. I call balls and strikes the way John Coltrane plays my favorite things. Folks come to the game to hear the sound of my music. Some batters stand in the box like bass players who don't know how to play. If I'm not behind the plate, I'm dancing in the infield, calling runners out and safe like James Brown sliding across the stage. I've had managers run from the dugouts only to protest and scream, please, please, please. And then I'll read one more. I'll read the title of this one. This is How I Found Love Behind the Catcher's Mask. All my life, I've caught hell. I never wanted to be a catcher. When meeting a woman, I never know what signs to put down. I never have enough protection. Once a girlfriend told me she was pregnant. She lied, but I didn't know it. A man can only see so much. I live a life of blueness. Behind my mask, a Buddha smile of suffering. Before dying, it's important to play catch with yourself. You don't have to wait for a woman to throw love at you. And I'll end with one poem from the beginning of this book, which is sort of like I'll read this one, Old Timers Day. And I'll tell you this. Can I just say this? So in about a month, I've been invited. There's the National Baseball Poetry Festival. And they asked me to throw out a ball at the start of the game. It's something I always wanted to do, right? But then there's something that I remember at some of these old timers games, that there would be a guy that, you have their baseball card, but now they're like 75 years old and they get out down there and the ball rolls to they throw it and it doesn't get to the catcher. So what happened? I getting this invitation I've been waiting for all my life. It doesn't matter, there's a minor league part. What happened? I decided that, well, I'll just get in shape. So I go in my backyard and, put a little bag of leaves there I can aim at. And I threw it and the ball just rolled to like the first row. And I realized something, that I, being 75 this year, was throwing like a 75-year-old person. And what happened, you don't realize that you have no philosophy. There's no philosophy, but your arm is not that strong. You're mentally, I see the catcher there. I can throw there, but the arm doesn't go there anymore. And you realize that you're part of the old timer group and you should just wave at people. And this is called Old Timers Day. The workers arrived today, bringing tools to change my home place. My place one day will no longer be safe. This is what aging does to the body when things fail and the walls of youth become Berlin after the Cold War. Old age is coldness, bones reduced to everything that is fragile. How we break is how we suffer, is how we die, is how we dream backwards. The workers install railings and handlebars to prevent my falling, as if falling in love was still possible. I loved the Yankees when I was young, when I thought I could be a pitcher. Yes, I wanted my name to be called on Old Timers Day, after all my mistakes and errors. Call my name, God, after Jim Coates, Art Ditmar, Ryan Duran, Whitey Ford, Don Larson, Duke Moss, Bobby Shantz, Rob Terry, Bob Turley, Louis Arroyo, and tall Steve Hamilton. Call my name, God, when I walk slowly from the dugout to wave at the crowd, tip my hat, and call it a day. And let me end on this note. A friend of mine gave this book to their father who was up in age and actually dying. And sometimes, I go into senior citizen homes, and you'd be surprised that when you write about baseball, it brings back for the elderly people memories. Like everybody remembers Jackie Robinson. Everybody, is a Boston Red Sox fan. Um, and I remember my friend with her cell phone recorded her father reading my poem, and he reads this poem and he goes, "Oh, Jim Coates, Ryan Duran." All of a sudden, he remembered, his memory. Oh, I remember that guy. And Ryan Duran had these sunglasses. I remember I had his baseball card. He had his sunglasses. He had bad vision, and he threw like maybe back then like 90 miles an hour. And when he came out of a relief pitcher, he immediately threw at somebody's head. So the person's like, "You got these sunglasses? Did you see the plate?" So it was intimidation. But I like to have my friend shared her father reading this poem, and you realize that a poem sometimes helps a person remember. And baseball, just like soccer, we were talking about soccer and other sports, that's your childhood, okay? And you don't want anybody to take those memories away from you.
Y'all have any questions?
You gonna share your water with us?
You got one right there.
Okay, that was the best part of the conversation.
Do the wonderful audience members have any questions?
Calling you.
Well, I am very really interested about what you said. I know nothing about this, but where you said the parents are like second being, and I'm curious, like kind of like people in the room sense like that meant something to you. And I have, making a film about my dad. And so I spend a lot of time in that parent-child relationship, and I'm
Well, it's what happens in terms of second shortstop. Those are key positions. Oh, those are key positions. I mean, I think one of the most important players on a baseball field is pretty much the catcher and sometimes the shortstop and second baseman, because they're the ones that have to sometimes relay the play to the outfielder. So, and they're seeing everything. They can't be, they have to be concentrating, on the pitcher and the bat, everything. And so what happened, those are our parents sometimes, and sometimes I know our parents are concerned about us getting to first base safely. Especially when you go off to college. Then there's a whole thing of getting to second. That's when you're growing up. That's when you might make mistakes. If you get to third, just like Chuck Collins is like, he was very wealthy. He said he was born on third base because that's what inherited wealth. But what happens is that I think baseball is very instructional for households. If you go back and think about fathers and sons, or even sons and fathers and daughters now, the whole thing of sharing a basketball, sharing a baseball creates a certain special tie between a parent and a child. And it's something that even if you have a difficult relationship with your father or mother, um, if they played sports, sometimes that's what held them together, and you can get through your childhood and maybe even your adolescence without, being in therapy. You're looking at me like a therapist.
Can I add to this? Can I add to this baseball theme? Because I'm so gay. I played softball for 13 years. I mean, I played I'm such a yeah, it was a stereotype. I played in college actually, at my small liberal arts college. I want to add to this metaphor for some reason. I think second and shortstop are defense, and the catcher is really important because the catcher does see the whole field. Because I did play catcher, but your shortstop is the most athletic person on your team, and the second base and shortstop has to protect the middle. So anything that goes up the middle of the field to stop a hitter from getting on base really is up to mostly the shortstop, but also the second baseman. Um, and they're also responsible for relaying signs to the outfielders. Um, and so if you're thinking from this from defense, I think in some ways the shortstop and the second baseman are protectors of the infield. Um, they keep they sort of keep bad things or scoring from happening. So if you see it that way, then there's something really interesting about those positions, because if your shortstop sucks, I mean, they're going to score. But also, like, there's something porous or there's something secure about having a really good shortstop and second baseman.
I had a question for you. Um, because you really surprised me. I didn't know you were going to read my work, but I was wondering the connection you made to your own voice and your own work, the preparing the poems. And I was just wondering, did certain things just jump out at you when you were reading some of the haiku that you said, oh, I have a poem about this?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. Certain of them seem to kind of have the same flavor of something of mine, and I thought it would be fun since we were reading together, and I was going through the book and reading a lot of them aloud to my husband.
Mhm.
I just thought, well, that could be fun.
Okay.
So thank you. Thank you. I'm very proud of myself. I started writing almost 40 years ago, and was very much an immature person who was in my own way. And so took a very long time to be able to have a book. I was mostly a fiction writer for my entire adult life and didn't know much about poetry, and honestly still don't know that much about poetry. But I fell in love with a poet 22 years ago now. So became very intensely interested in poetry and wanted to know about it and tried to write it. And I wrote, I'd say, not very good forms. I loved forms and tried every possible form. I don't think I was very skilled at it, but I enjoyed it. And this book, which is a kind of hybrid book, it was a book that I didn't intentionally write, and so I couldn't exactly answer the question about, I don't even remember all the parts of the question, but this book was a somewhat accidental book, and so wasn't exactly part of my poetry writing process.
Or can I follow up to that? What's the relationship between humor and pain, or comedy and suffering for you? They rub each other so close in your book and in your poems. And I wonder if you could talk about it.
I think I'm always, my ex-husband and my current husband both have this tendency. So I kind of think of it as Jewish to, talk about the time your dad was chasing you around the kitchen with a butcher knife and you're like cracking up. So somehow the Jews as a people try to kind of deal with their pain by making a really hilarious story about it. I don't know if that has influenced me. I guess that's a good question. I probably have used dark humor as a way of coping and of making sense of painful things that have happened to me. How about yourself?
I am far less funny about it. You are hilarious.
It's not very funny.
No, it's not funny at all.
It's like, it's like, yeah. So no.
Yeah. But you were, especially first, you were very courageous to write about what you were writing about, because when you deal with the sort of violence that we see sometimes within the household, sometimes you can't ignore it, but sometimes you censor yourself. And I wonder, how did you find your voice to be able? I mean, how do you workshop something like that?
Yeah, it took many, many years. I think I've always been a poet. I'm not very good at prose, even when I've like had tried my knack at it. Maybe one day I'll try again. And especially when I was a young poet, I often got the response of like, this is too chaotic, like this is too much. And that's already a very terrible thing to say to a young person who's deeply traumatized, but I pushed through. And I think for me, I sort of learning form actually became a really integral part of me being able to express the affect that was so intense. I soon figured out, for better or worse, that if I make it pretty, no one can say anything to me, especially in workshop, especially in MFA, which a lot of these poems were written in an MFA. But I had to write them. I couldn't write about anything else. And when I did, it was almost as if people could sense a kind of inauthenticity in my work. And I felt, you know, I tend to always feel this way. And, it's a small crowd, so I'll be vulnerable to keep on. I yeah, I know. That's fine. It's fine. Hopefully the archives won't find this. Um, yeah, I felt for a long time that writing about my mother, especially as like a Black queer person, wasn't quite, fashionable enough, as a poet. But it was also the only thing I could write about. The thing that keeps pushing me or pushing me or pulling me back to poetry. Um, so yeah, I mean, I really didn't have a choice if I was going to be honest. We talk a lot about writing truth. And, I'm also training to be a philosopher, so I hate that word too. But I do want to practice honesty in my work. And the honesty not only came from uh, the admission of a particular kind of domestic violence, but also the fact that a lot of this domestic violence came from the infiltration of anti-Blackness on the family structure, um, the erasure of African Americans in California, specifically Northern California. So it's not simply that I was writing toward the pain of a family unit, but also the originary rupture that is ongoing.
No, I wanted to ask you a question. This started when we were in the green room. Um, when I think of form and structure, I think of your husband, who's, um, it really seems like he's really the expert on form and structure because he does those books about forms and poetics and structure. I was wondering, as a writer, are you intimidated by that? Do you have to find your own voice? Or do you benefit from the fact that you say, okay, I, c- I can write in this form without looking over my shoulder to see whether my husband's going to correct something?
With this particular book, I wasn't thinking about form in any way. And I think as incredibly different as we are as people and as our work is, we were on some basic level writing from the same impulse, which is to survive.
Hmm.
and to know ourselves, know really painful things about ourselves, and to, in a way, expose ourselves, but in service of eventually, I think, of healing. And so I didn't, form was the last thing on my mind. Like surviving was on my mind. And I thought about form much later.
Well, let's talk about the surviving, because I look at how, especially in the 70s, people were talking about the need for a women writer to have that women's space. Did you have the space to create and have that? Okay, I can do whatever I want to do. Was there that space for you, like a spiritual space or a physical space?
I don't know. Maybe writing was making it. Maybe writing was, well, actually, probably, I mean, in retrospect, writing was the only way I could make it. I don't know if you felt that. But it was, I was not, I was not able to advocate for myself. I was not very agentic as a person. And that writing almost helped me to be a person. Maybe you could.
Um, I like this writing to make this space. I think for me, it was writing something that was fundamentally languageless without words. So to me, it was almost to make it real, to make it an entity that I could show people. It's very difficult to walk around with an invisible wound. It's very difficult to give it to someone, to show it, the contours of it. But yeah, it was a survival. It was a survival mechanism for me for a really long time. I I'm toxically prolific and I'm slowing down now, which is probably a sign of healing that I'm sort of slowing down or more deliberate. But I would just sort of thrust myself into poetry uh, to try to say it, um, to say the thing that was always elusive from me. And the poem, perhaps each of these poems, perhaps were garments, uh, sort of the hem of something. You know, it's still not wholly the thing, but it was a way to make it real, something I could hand someone, you know. Yeah.
I think that's exactly somehow was my impulse, that I felt incredible torment, that it was eating me alive. And to make it into language, it made it a thing outside of me. And the things that came out were so odd, but I was making like a scene or a fable or a dreamscape or a dialogue that would give some, even if just in language, some substance to a thing that is completely interior and invisible. And so it's making it exterior, it's making it visible. And so then it's like it has a voice. And so, and I think I was first giving it to myself.
How did you know when you have a book now, where what happens is that you're healing, and so that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a book. And then if you're the process of putting the book together, what are you leaving out? What are you putting together? How do the poems begin to, interact with each other so that you have a book and you say, okay, this is my book. And then also, how has this book defined you and what's next?
This book, I didn't know I had a book until I found a notebook. I'd written a lot of these things in like 3 or 4 years after I just put it away. I'd never intended it to be anything, nor did I read it. And when I discovered it, it was as if I had discovered the writing of some other person entirely. I had never written like that. I didn't remember writing it. It was in my handwriting. I remembered the notebook, but it was years. And so it eventually became a book because I knew it had something, but I felt it was very kind of terrifying. I didn't even know if it was good. It was only when I typed them out, edited them, and shaped it did I think I might have a book. And I mean, you can
Did readings help? You know, some people in the process of putting the book, they share their work with others. They do readings and stuff. Did you do any of that?
No.
Okay. All right.
I think that's our time.
Okay. Oh, all right. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, audience members and online people, and thank both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lovely conversation. I could have listened to you all talk for the next hour. Thank you all for being here tonight. We have copies for sale upstairs of all 3 books and more. And thank you to our virtual audience for being here. And happy National Poetry Month. Yay!